Today I'm going to show you how to turn this into this. For this you'll need Blender, the free add-on Ucupaint, and the blend file with the canister, all of which are linked below so you can download them and follow along. If you're using Blender 4.2, you can also now get Ucupaint just by searching for it in the Blender Extensions menu by going to Edit, Preferences, Get Extensions, and searching for Ucupaint, and you can install it from there. Since we're not sculpting or baking any details, that's a different tutorial, we can jump right into painting our texture. The awesome thing that makes Ucupaint so similar to Substance Painter is that you have total control over each channel. That means that as well as painting color, you can paint in your roughness, metallic, and normal maps. Here's an example. I'll add a solid color layer to this sphere. Then I'll go down to the channel options for this layer. I can enable the metallic channel on this layer and tweak its values to change how metallic it is. This, combined with Blender's built-in texture painting, is how we'll make our radiation canister. So open up the radiation canister blend file, then make sure you're in material preview mode. To save ourselves a lot of hassle, we're first going to create some vertex groups. Basically, we're going to create a set of saved selections, which will help prevent us from painting on parts of the model we don't want to, and it'll make the whole process simpler. To do that, hop into Edit mode, and make sure you're in Face Select mode by either clicking this button up here, or hitting number 3 on your keyboard, not your numpad. Then, point your cursor right next to one of the vertical edges of these extruded parts. Hold Shift and Alt, and then click. This will select the entire loop that goes around the model. Let's do the same for the extruded bit at the bottom. Now, we can save time by hitting Ctrl and numpad plus to grow our selection. Grow your selection just up until it touches the main body of the canister. Next, navigate to the Data panel, here, and under Vertex Groups, click the plus button, give the group a name, in this case Metal Bands, and hit Assign. Since you want the rest of the canister as another vertex group, you can hit Ctrl and I to invert your selection. Then add a new vertex group, name it Green Metal, then click Assign. Now we can easily recall these selections at a later time while we're painting, which will help us mask off the sections we don't want to paint. Let's hop back into object mode. Select the canister, then open your N panel by hitting N, that's this one here, and navigate to Ucupaint. Then click Quick Ucupaint Node Setup. Ambient occlusion is off by default, but I'm going to turn it on in case I want to use it later. Then hit OK. The first thing you want to do is open the color channel options, here, and enable alpha. This will give you the option to paint something completely transparent, like this, should you decide you want to do that. Your object will disappear when you enable it, but it's still there, as you can see from the outline. It's just transparent right now, so let's add our first layer. Navigate to the Add Layer button, and select Solid Color from the list. You can pick whatever color you want, but I've gone with a cool blue because this is going to be the actual metal beneath all the paint. Once you're happy with the color, hit OK. Since you want it to be metallic, navigate to the channel options for this layer, right here, and enable the metallic channel. As you can see, it instantly becomes more metallic once it's enabled. If for some reason it isn't looking right, you can enable the override for the channel and tweak it even further. If you also enable the roughness channel and tweak both the metallic and roughness values, you can get whatever result you're looking for. In our case, we want something that is clearly metallic but not super shiny, so you can use the values shown here if you want, or experiment and see what result you like. Let's also rename this layer to Metal Underlay. Next, navigate to the Add New Layer button again and select New Image from the options. Let's call this layer Green Paint Base. Then click and drag over the width and height to edit them both at the same time. Set the resolution to 2048, then select OK. Now let's switch into Edit mode and select the Green Metal vertex group from the list, then click Select. This will quickly select all of the vertices that we assigned to this group earlier, and we'll use this selection to define where we want to put the paint. Let's now switch to texture painting mode. At the top left of the screen is the Paint Mask button. Enabling this button tells Blender that we only want to paint on the faces we have selected, meaning we've masked off any unselected faces. While in texture painting mode, you can quickly toggle the paint masking on and off using the number 1 above your QWERTY keys. Once we enable paint masking, you'll see that a white overlay is placed on our model. This overlay shows us which of the faces are currently masked and which won't be affected by our painting. Let's go to the Fill tool and select a green color in the color picker, then click on our canister. The layer will turn green like we wanted, but right now only the color channel is active on this layer. The metallic channel is presently inactive on this layer, so the paint inherits the metallic value from the other layers. Since I want this layer to look like paint on top of the metal, I need to adjust its roughness values. So I'll open the layer channel options here and enable the roughness channel. If the main slider isn't giving you the look you want, open up the override and tweak it until it looks right. Once I'm happy with the roughness, I'll hit Ctrl S to save, and I want you to notice something here. Before I hit Ctrl S, there's an asterisk in the green paint base layer, right here. This tells me that the image we created with this layer is unsaved. Once I hit Ctrl S and the file is saved, however, there's a nice little icon of boxes. This means that Ucupaint has saved and packed the image for you, preventing you from having to save each image individually and potentially losing it if you don't. This is just a super nice feature of Ucupaint I thought you should know about. Okay, now we want to add some paint onto the metal rims of the canister. To do that, let's once again go to the Add New Layer button and select New Image. Ucupaint will remember your previous settings for each layer type, so all you need to change this time is to give it a different name. I want these metal bands to be painted yellow, so I'll name the layer Yellow Metal Bands, then click OK. Next, I'll hop into Edit mode, hit Alt and A to deselect everything, choose Metal Bands from the Vertex group list, hit Select, and then hop back into texture painting mode. Notice that the green parts of the canister now have the white overlay, so we know they're masked off. Let's stay on the Fill tool, but open the color picker and select a nice bright yellow, then click on the metal bands. Once again, only the color channel is active on this layer, so the yellow paint will look metallic. Once again, I'll go to the layer channel options, enable the metallic and roughness channels, and tweak the values to get the look that I want. Once I think the yellow paint looks right, I'll turn off paint masking by hitting 1 on my keyboard to get a sense of the overall look of the object. You can click on each layer and make adjustments to the metallic and roughness channels to get the object looking the way you want. Now it gets interesting. For the next layer, I want to add some variation in roughness and some variation in height. So let's go to the Add New Layer button and select New Image, and call it Green Metal Grime. This time though, we want to enable this 32-bit float box right here. We want this box enabled for this layer because we're going to be painting on the normal channel, as well as the roughness channel, and normal maps benefit from a higher bit depth. In other words, it'll look messed up if we don't enable the 32-bit box. The resolution we can leave at 2K, then let's hit OK. Now I want to show you something. Let's say I want the exact green from this paint layer, but I didn't save it in a palette. Well, if you're ever painting and you want to select an exact color, you can select the layer in question, then enable preview mode here with layer set in the drop-down menu. This will show you the actual color of this layer instead of the color that shows up when the object has been rendered in the viewport. Hover over the object and hit S to eyedropper that selected color. Now you can paint with it or add it to a palette for future recall. Blender's texture painting tools have independent color selections. As you can see, my Fill tool's color is set to green, but my brush color is set to white. Goodness. What's neat though is that you can copy and paste between the tools. For instance, if I want the green from my Fill tool, I can hover over the color here, hit Ctrl C, then select my brush tool, hover over its color, and press Ctrl V to paste it. Or, if you were smart, like I'm not, you could add it to a palette. Alright, now that our brush tool is set to the green we want, we can start painting. But since I want this layer to be a little bit darker, I'll go to the layer channel's blend modes here and set it to multiply. Then, since we want to paint only on the green parts, I'll hop into Edit mode, hit Alt-A to deselect everything, and then select Green Metal from the Vertex group list, followed by Select. Or, since in this case we know that our canister's geometry is the opposite of our current selection, which is the metal bands, we could just hit Ctrl-I to invert our selection. With the green metal selected, hop back into texture painting mode and make sure that the paint masking button is enabled. I'll make a marker too, then enable the roughness channel, and you can see that there's already variation where we made those marks. I'll also enable the metallic channel and the normal channel. At first, it looks like nothing has changed, but if we open the normal channel options, we can see this bump value. I recommend holding Shift while adjusting this value so that it moves more precisely. As you can see, our marks are now changing the apparent depth on the normal channel. I'll fiddle with the values until I'm happy with the look. Before I paint this in though, I want to go to my tool options here, scroll down to the options drop down, and change the bleed to 6. This will just help prevent any UV seams from showing up. Let's also change our fall off to 90 so that our strokes go right to the edge. Then I'm simply going to paint in some bumps and dents all over the model, which I'll speed up. While I'm doing this, I'm just trying to be mindful of the effect I'm going for while I'm painting in the damage. And don't worry if you overdo it, you can always adjust the layer's opacity or even go in and tweak or erase the parts you don't like. Ucupaint not only makes that possible, but pretty straightforward as well. Okay, once I think I'm done with painting in the bumps, I'll toggle paint masking off by hitting 1 on my keyboard to see the overall look. Now the model shows the variations we painted in with the color, metallic, roughness, and normal channels. You can always adjust the overall effect of this layer with the opacity slider in the layer list right here, like I did. Let's go into front orthographic view by hitting 1 on our numpad or by holding the tilde key for the view pie menu and dragging to the top left corner where it says front. Once in front orthographic view, the next thing we want to do is paint in some edge wear on the yellow metal bands. So just like before, let's hop into edit mode, select our bands from the vertex group list, then hop back into texture painting mode. Let's select our yellow metal bands layer. The plan is to erase parts of the yellow paint from this layer, revealing the metal underlay layer beneath it. To save us from needing to paint all the way around the model a tiny bit at a time, let's go to the tool options, here, scroll down to the options section, then disable occlude and backface culling. This will let our painted strokes go all the way through the model, so we only need to make them once. Then, in the Ucupaint interface, select the toggle eraser button. This quickly switches between your current brush settings and the eraser. We can adjust the strength of the eraser by hitting Shift F and moving our mouse left and right. We can adjust the size or radius of the eraser just by hitting F and moving our mouse as well. And this works for all of the tools. Let's set the strength to 1 and the radius to around 8 pixels. We can also get a nice clean line by going to the stroke menu, here, opening the stroke method options and selecting line, or you can simply hit Alt-E in the viewport to bring up a short list of stroke methods and select line from there. Then simply drag across the model where you want the yellow paint to be erased, like so. Since the yellow metal will likely be most damaged on its edges, that's where I'm going to erase. The next thing we want to do is add some variation to this edge wear. We can do that by selecting the smudge tool here. Let's adjust its strength with Shift F and its radius with F. Then to save time, also enable X symmetry up here. Now when we start smudging the paint, it starts to look a little bit like edge wear. Once you've gone around each edge and made some preliminary marks, be sure to turn occlude and backface culling back on. If you don't, it will drive you crazy. Only disable these when you are absolutely certain that you want your stroke to go all the way through the mesh. Then, with occlude and backface culling re-enabled, I recommend turning symmetry off and making some unique marks to break up the pattern of the edge wear. Next, let's add some painted ambient occlusion. Basically, we're going to add some shadows where light would have trouble bouncing around. Let's go to the Add New Layer button, select New Image, and name it Painted AO. Since we aren't using any normals on this layer, turn off the 32-bit checkbox, then select OK. Let's change this layer's blend mode to multiply, and ensure that we're using our brush tool and not our eraser. Next, with your brush tool selected, open the color picker and choose the color you'd like for your shadows. For added visual interest, I'm going to choose a complementary color to green, so somewhere in the purple range. I'll lower the strength of my brush by hitting Shift F and moving my mouse to the left. Since I want the shadow to go evenly around the entire mesh, I'll go to the tool panel, scroll down to options, and once again disable occlude and backface culling, then hit Alt-E to bring up a short list of stroke methods and choose line. Let's also mask off the yellow metal bands by hopping into edit mode, selecting our green metal from the vertex groups, and then hopping back into texture painting mode and making sure that paint masking is enabled by hitting 1 on our keyboard. Now we simply need to drag out our shadows where the green metal and yellow bands meet. This will simulate two surfaces close together where light will have trouble bouncing around, and therefore it'll look more shadowed. Once you have the basic shadows in place, turn occlude and backface culling back on, then go over your shadows with the blur tool and the smudge tool to add some variation. I'll also quickly check my model with a rendered viewport just to get a sense of how it's looking. I'd like to add some scratchy looking bits to certain areas, and to get maximum control over what those scratches look like, we can make a custom texture mask. I'll teach you how to do this using Krita since it's completely free, but you can also do this with your preferred digital painting software. Open up Krita, then set your image to a square 1x1 resolution. Something like 3000 by 3000 is plenty. Fill the base layer with black, then create a new layer on top of that and paint in your desired texture with white. Grayscale values will work as well, but the black parts of this texture will have no effect. Essentially, the black part is masked. Once you're happy with the image, export it as a PNG to some place where you can easily find it again, then hop back into Blender. Let's select the green paint base layer. Since we want this texture mask to look like scratches in the green paint, let's make sure that we are on the eraser tool, then go to Texture Mask, click New, then select the hamburger icon here, which will bring up the texture menu in the tool panel on the right. Select Open and navigate to the texture mask you just saved. Next, go to the stroke menu and select Anchored from the list of stroke methods. The Anchored Stroke method lets you click and drag to scale your stroke and is perfect for texture masks like this one. So, click and hold while dragging your mouse and you'll see the green paint is erased, but only in the places that are white in the texture mask. I'll place a few of those scratches around the model, and when I'm finished with the texture mask, I'll open up the texture mask menu once again, then hit the X to disable the texture. I'll change the stroke method back to space, which is the default for painting, and I'll go around the model and paint in some additional scratches by hand. To get the scratches and wear on the inside of the canister, I'll use the same method as before. Go to Front Orthographic View, disable Occlude and Backface Culling, switch my stroke method to Line, and erase the green paint. Then I'll turn Occlude and Backface Culling back on, and use the Smudge and Blur tools to add variation to the weathering. Let's give it another quick look in a rendered viewport. Okay, looking alright, but it needs some color variation. By now you're probably a bit more comfortable with adding new layers and messing with channels, so let's add another layer. I want the color variation layer to be under the painted AO layer, so let's select the green metal grime layer and then add the new layer, because new layers are always created above the currently selected layer. Also, you can always move layers around by selecting them and hitting these arrows, which can sometimes alter the effect of the layers. So let's go to the Add New Layer button, select New Image, and call it Color Variation, then hit OK. Make sure you're in Material Preview mode once again, and make sure you toggle the eraser off. You can check which tool is active right here. For this layer, we just want to paint on some colors that we think will complement the object. I'll start with some blue, then hit Shift F to reduce the strength, F to change the size of my brush, and then I'll start painting in some colors. I'll switch between blue, some green, and a bunch of a dark muddy orange to lend some rusty grunge color. I'll just jump back and forth around the model, adding some color variation where I think it looks nice. I'll give it another check in the rendered viewport. Alright, it's coming along. Next, I want to break up the shape of the canister a bit by adding in some panel edges, but since we aren't sculpting any details, we need to paint them in. I also want to add a bright yellow radiation symbol to this canister, so let's start with that. Let's add a new layer and call it Yellow Radiation Warning. Go to your brush tool and set it to be a brightish yellow. I made the radiation icon earlier in Krita, and to put it on our canister, I'll show you another way to paint with a texture mask. Head up to the Texture dropdown, not the Texture Mask dropdown, and hit New, then the hamburger, and open your radiation icon file. In my case, the texture was already loaded in, so I just selected it from the available mask images. With the mask active, go into Front Orthographic View, then hit Alt-E to bring up the stroke method shortlist, and select Anchored. We also want to go to the Fall-Off menu here, and change the fall-off to constant. That way there's no soft edges on the outsides of our mask. Then click and drag out where you want your texture to be, like so. If we give it a look in render mode, it looks pretty alright. Now let's add the panel lines. Select the painted AO layer, then hit the Add New Layer button and select New Image, call it Panel Lines, and enable the 32-bit float because we will be drawing with normals. Then hit OK. Open the Layer Channel options here and turn the Normal channel on and the Color channel off. Hit Alt-E to bring up the stroke method shortlist and select Line. Also, make sure that paint masking is enabled so that we don't paint panel lines into the yellow metal bands. Now, as an example, I'll drag out a line so you can see what it does. Since a normal channel is the only active channel right now, the only effect we see is that there's now a recessed line painted into our object, which is exactly what we want. I'll undo that, then select a dark green in the color picker. I'll go into left orthographic view by holding tilde and dragging to the left, change my fall off back to smooth, which is the default here. I'll turn the color channel back on, then I'll draw a stroke from the top to the bottom of the center of the canister. Now if I tweak the color channel value here, I can control the illusion of shadow within this stroke. Let's do the same on a different part of the model. This time I'll draw a really long stroke, just to show you that, like any other layer, you can go in and erase things. So I'll hit toggle eraser, and erase out the extra bits of panel line. I'll make sure to toggle the eraser off once I'm done erasing, then with my stroke method set to line, I'll go around making panel cuts where I think they look neat. Once we're happy with the panel lines, we can add some rivets. Let's add a new image layer, call it rivets, keep the 32-bit float enabled, and hit OK. I'm going to pick a different color here, but you don't have to. Next, let's change our stroke method to anchored, and enable the normal channel on this layer. Then all we're going to do is drag in some rivet shapes in places that look good. Next, let's fill in one of these panels with a yellow color. Let's do this on the layer with the radiation sign since it's the same color. If I want the exact yellow color from the radiation sign, I'll select that layer, turn on preview mode, and then hit S while hovering over the radiation icon to sample its color. I'll turn off preview mode and start painting in the panel. Once I'm done, I'll toggle the eraser and erase the yellow to keep the edge damage. Those extra observant viewers out there may notice this color diff layer. Don't worry, you didn't miss a step, I just tested something and forgot to delete it. Let's add one final layer under the green metal grime layer. Click the Add New Layer button, choose New Image, and call it Actual Grime, and make sure that the 32-bit float is disabled. Then click OK. Make sure your brush is set to paint, not to erase, and then pick a muddy orange color. Something like dirty rust, ideally. I'm going to pick this color, and I'm going to paint it pretty much anywhere rust would collect, so on edges, in cracks, and where water would run down the surface. I'll start off with a low opacity to help me block in the grime and see what works, then I'll add more grime once I like how it looks, and I'll speed this part up. I also add some of the orange color to the yellow metal bands, since they too would get grimy. Once I'm happy with the grimy look, we're pretty much done the painting. I'll do a quick light setup to see if it looks alright. Yeah, it looks alright. Let's bake the texture down and export this canister into a game engine. In my case, Unreal Engine. To save all of our painting work to a single texture, let's head up to the Ucupaint special menu, here, then choose Bake All Channels. In the bake settings, I'll set the resolution to 2K, samples to 8, and AA level to 2, with my GPU doing the baking. Then I'll hit OK. This will take a second to bake down, so just be patient. Once the bake is finished, you'll notice this new Used Baked button in the Layers section of Ucupaint. You can toggle that off if you want to edit and rebake any of your layers, so you still have total access to your painting. This little button to the right of that is the Bake External button, which is basically magic because it saves us from needing to duplicate and set up another object and material. If you check Bake External, then export the object as a GLTF, the GLTF file will contain the proper materials, saving a ton of time. With our radiation canister baked and exported, we're ready to import it into a game engine, so I'll load up Unreal. Alright, now that I'm here in Unreal, I'll just import the canister. It will look borked when you bring it in at first, and I think that's because we had alpha enabled when we were painting. To fix it, just double click its material, go to the blend mode, and set it to opaque. And voila, a fully hand-painted, stylized PBR canister, ready to go in Engine. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and that you gained a little more insight into the insane power of Ucupaint. If you make something using this method, tag me on X @MoltenBolt so I can see your work, or come join tons of other artists in the Discord. Alright everyone, I'll be back in a bit with another video. Deuces.